Well, let's take a look at Chapter 17, Workforce Diversity and Wellness. What's this all about? Here are the objectives. Alrighty, so let's take a look at this model. It's a little bit, it's not drawn accurately, but I'll walk you through it. This external pressures for and against diversity represents everything within the red circle, which means it's outside of the organization. It's external to the organization. And internal pressures for and against diversity are everything that occurs in here, inside the organization. So external pressure for and against diversity, what would be an external pressure would be, federal regulations and so on. And against diversity might be individual actions or group actions that are anti-diversity in some way. And then within an organization, internal pressures for and against a management's perspective and views. Whatever those are, the manager might be pro-diversity or not. The way that the organization responds might be for or in favor of or not a diverse workforce. And how they actually go about implementing what they do, especially in the area of diversity, can certainly be a function of the pressures that they feel in the organization. So a number of different contributing factors. So let's look at a diversity and what do we mean by it? Well, there's a number of different types of diversity, one of course being age. And you can see what the trends are. And because the baby boomers are aging, I'm one of them, the distribution of ages are changing. There's people in the workforce who are in their 70s in the same organization as somebody in their 20s, and that's 50 years difference. Imagine the difference in behaviors and values and things like that. Implications for the trends, well, cost of healthcare goes up, mobility goes down, security could be kind of on the chopping block, I think, for some people as they get a little older. So what kind of interventions can you as an OD person recommend to a client? Well, you could recommend a wellness program. You could recommend that they look at the design of the jobs for younger and older people, career development and planning, which we talked about in the last chapter, and also reward systems that are matched to the age diversity within the organization. Gender diversity also occurs. Obviously, we've got men and women out there. And women are growing in the population in the workforce, as they are in graduate programs and universities throughout the country and abroad. Dual income families are accordingly increasing, with more women coming back to the workforce. What are the implications for that? Well, child care is necessary, in some cases on the organization's premises. Maternity and paternity leaves, and dealing with single parents who have responsibilities. Some of you might be single parents out there. And what kind of intervention can you design for them and work with them as an OD person would be the design of the jobs, and as well as some type of fringe benefit reward program. Race and ethnicity diversity, of course, much of that going on as we become more and more diverse as a nation. Minorities representing a larger and larger segment of the workforce, and a small segment of top management and senior executives, but that number is growing. Qualifications and experience of minority employees is often overlooked. So what can you do? What are the implications? Well, the implications are that discrimination may be occurring in the organization. So what can you do? What kind of intervention can you, as an OD person, deliver? Equal employment opportunity intervention, where you would make sure that all the EEO regulations are understood and applied and responded to. A mentoring program to help those who are trying to make their way through the organization and are facing discrimination issues. And the same thing with education and training for all involved. Same thing with sexual orientation diversity. Of course, that's a hot topic these days with same-sex marriages occurring, and just recently, I think it was a few days ago, an NBA basketball player came out of the closet, if you will. Another recent college graduate collegiate player was drafted into the NFL. So there's, the whole idea of sexual orientation is becoming more and more prominent and tolerated by some and not tolerated by others for all the ideological reasons around um, religion and so on. But what kind of intervention can you bring in? Equal opportunity employees, fringe benefits, education, training, very similar to diversity training. Disability diversity. More and more people who have some type of disability are being brought into the workplace. And of course, that means that the job skills can be challenging issues. The organization's got to deal with physical space in many cases and deal with the issues of respect and dignity for those who are disabled. What kind of intervention might you bring to the table? Performance management, which we've talked about, job design, which we've talked about, and career planning and development, which we've discussed. Culture and values diversity. Rising proportion of immigrant and minority group workers. We're all pretty much aware of how the demographics of the United States are changing, and we're not alone. So are the demographics of Europe as the entire globe becomes more and more a melting pot, people moving from countries to countries. Shift in the reward systems. One of the problems, the implications that what's necessary then, more flexible organizational policies, more autonomy on the part of the not only the employees but the managers and the supervisors, and affirmation and respect for differences in values. That's sometimes called plurality. It's diversity and plurality. Diversity, we're just trying to make sure everybody's involved. Plurality means that we're actually calling upon individual differences to help get done what we need to get done. So there are those interventions again: career planning, employee involvement, and reward systems. Let's move on to stress. How does stress work at work? There are certainly a number of workplace stressors, and we could create a course all by itself just related to stress at work. But in the top left-hand corner, what are some of the stressors? Well, the physical environment itself. So think of a firefighter, a pretty stressful environment. The individual, role conflict and ambiguity, lack of control. So what am I supposed to be doing? What's my role? I'm not sure. It's confusing. I don't have any control over these kinds of things that are happening to me. I'm being asked to do things I wasn't supposed to be doing here. All sorts of things that can cause stress. Group level stress. When we have poor peer, subordinate, or boss relationships. So in other words, you're just not getting along. And it's stressful to not get along for nearly everyone. Some people maybe it doesn't bother them too much, but they're in a class by themselves. Most of us, if we're not getting along with one or more people, we feel some type of stress. And at the organizational level, poor design of the organization, poor HR policies and practices, and then of course internal politics can be very, very stressful. So that's this box right here, and of course what does that lead to is stress. How you feel or perceive the organizational stressors. What might bother you doesn't bother me, or what does bother me over here doesn't bother you. Depends. It's an individual experience. But the consequences based on that experience can be, on a subjective individual level, anxiety. I can feel anxious, or I can feel apathy. I just don't care. Might even get into drug and alcohol abuse. In terms of my thinking skills, I might have poor focus. I might burn out. Physiologically, I might, experience high blood pressure, pulse. Physiological responses to stress. And at the organizational level, what do they get out of it if everybody's stressed? Is low productivity. People are not showing up. Absenteeism goes up, and there could even be legal action taken against organizations that are providing or producing undue stress on its employees. And then down in the bottom left-hand corner, individual differences, and you can notice that dotted line here, that these individual differences can contribute to how these stressors relate to stress in a person's experience. So what stresses me might not stress you, and so on. Cognitive and affective. Affective here means feelings. Type A or B type of a personality. Hardiness. Some people can handle it. Some people are thick-skinned and can handle it. Some people can't. Social support. Some need it. Some don't. Negative affectivity means acting out and being a jerk. Negative feelings, not feeling good, and demonstrating that you're not happy. So biological, if you want to think of it that way, or demographic differences. So how old I am, where we actually live, whether I'm male or female, the kind of occupation, race, all of these things can contribute to individual differences related to stress. So simply stated, what stresses you may not stress me, and vice versa. And it can fall in any of these types of areas that we've just looked at. Let's see, stress and wellness interventions. What could you bring to the table as an OD person? One, role clarification, help people understand and determine what is expected of me, and do I understand the role I'm in and what I'm supposed to be doing. It's very difficult, and I've had that experience in my life, where I was working for an individual who came in and said, I want you to do this task, and I want you to write this report or do this kind of an investigation, blah, blah, blah. And I went, I don't get it. That's not what, huh? You know, what? Looking back, I think one of the reasons I enjoyed aviation for 25 years is that it's real clear. You know, you show up, you get the airplane ready, you fly the airplane from one point to another, and you're done and you walk away and it's over. Especially in the airline business. You just fly. You show up, you fly, you go home. That's it. In the Air Force, you show up, you fly, you go home, but then you go back to the squadron or flight or what have you and do other activities when you're not flying. But very, very clear what it is that we're supposed to do. But in some settings, people are not clear about what specific role they're supposed to be in. And it can be very, very stressful. Very high level of stress is related to what we call role ambiguity. Supportive relationships. I mean, help people establish trust and develop more positive relationships. Just in some cases, just simply facilitating a session where people have a conversation with their peers that's well overdue. And you help them ask questions that they just don't know how to ask of one another, or just won't ask of one another. Facilitating dialogue sessions, and kind of let's just lay our cards on the table and kind of get to know each other better. Other kind of intervention, work leaves, obviously, taking people off the job. Health facilities. Some organizations actually have in-house health facilities. You probably know about that, as well as employee assistance programs. And that's it. So hope you enjoyed a look at this chapter, and I will see you in the next one.